February 3, 1989, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Los Angeles. Charles Bronson was sitting in a plastic hospital chair, waiting for news about Jill's latest round of chemotherapy, when he noticed the woman across the waiting room. She was crying, clutching a crumpled piece of paper, a hospital bill estimate. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Her name was Maria Santos. She was 34 years old, a single mother of 3, and her 8-year-old son Miguel had just been diagnosed with leukemia. The surgery he needed would cost $85,000. Maria had $3,200 in her bank account. What Charles Bronson did next was not dramatic. There were no speeches, no emotional confrontations, no Hollywood moments. He simply stood up, walked to the hospital billing office, and handed them a check. And for 10 years, Maria Santos had no idea who had saved her son's life. This is the untold story of the night Charles Bronson performed his greatest act of heroism, not on screen, not with a gun, but with a quiet act of generosity that changed a family forever. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in 1989 was one of the most prestigious hospitals in Los Angeles. It treated celebrities, executives, and the wealthy elite. But it also treated everyone else, families who would come through the emergency room, patients who had been referred by doctors, people who had nowhere else to go. Charles had become a regular presence in the oncology wing over the past 2 years. Jill's breast cancer had progressed, despite multiple surgeries and rounds of chemotherapy. Her doctors at Cedars-Sinai were the best in the country, and Charles refused to take her anywhere else. He developed a routine. Every time Jill went in for treatment, Charles would sit in the waiting room for hours. Sometimes the treatments lasted 6, 7, 8 hours. Charles would bring a book, but he rarely read it. Instead, he watched. He observed the other families in that waiting room, the fear, the hope, the desperation. He saw parents clutching their children's hands. He saw spouses staring at walls, lost in their own terror. He saw people crying quietly, trying not to disturb others. And he saw the bills. Everywhere, people held bills. The cruel mathematics of survival. How much it cost to keep someone alive. Charles understood this math personally. Jill's treatment had already cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Despite his fame and earning power, the numbers were staggering. He paid them without complaint, without hesitation, because that is what you did when someone you loved was fighting for their life. You paid whatever it took, but not everyone could afford what it took. And that reality haunted Charles every time he sat in that waiting room. On February 3, 1989, Jill was scheduled for another chemotherapy session. Charles drove her to Cedars-Sinai that morning, helped her through the intake process, and settled her into the treatment room with the nurses he would come to know well over the past 2 years. "I will be in the waiting room," he told her, squeezing her hand. Jill smiled weakly. "Go home, Charlie. You do not have to sit here for 6 hours. Try and stop me." He kissed her forehead and walked to the oncology waiting room. It was a large, beige-walled space with uncomfortable chairs, a television mounted in the corner, playing muted news, and a coffee machine that produced terrible coffee. Charles had spent dozens of hours in this room. He knew every crack in the ceiling, every stain on the carpet. He took his usual seat near a window and pulled out a paperback novel. For about 20 minutes he tried to read, but his attention kept drifting to the woman sitting across the room. She was Hispanic, mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She was wearing scrubs. She worked in healthcare, probably a nurse or medical technician. Her clothes were clean but worn, the kind of clothes that had been washed too many times. She was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears streaming down her face as she stared at the piece of paper in her hands. Every few seconds, she would wipe her eyes with the back of her hand, take a shaky breath, and look at the paper again, as if hoping the numbers had changed. Charles watched her for several minutes. He recognized that kind of crying. He would seen it in Jill. He would seen it in himself, in the mirror, on the nights when the fear got too big to contain. It was the crying of someone who had just received news that changed everything. He closed his book and stood up. Walking toward the woman felt natural, like something he had been planning to do all along. But in reality, Charles was acting on instinct, the same instinct that had made him intervene in that alley in New York, the same instinct that had driven him to stand up for Tommy Mitchell on the set of Rio Bravo. He stopped in front of her and waited. She did not notice him at first, too consumed by her tears, the paper in her hands. "Excuse me," Charles said gently. She looked up, startled. For a moment, she did not recognize him. Then her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition, but she quickly looked back down, embarrassed to have been caught crying. "I am sorry," she whispered, wiping her face. "I did not mean to. I am sorry. You do not need to apologize for crying," Charles said. He nodded toward the empty chair next to her. "May I sit?" She nodded, still not looking up. Charles sat down. He did not speak immediately. He would learn it, through years of sitting in this waiting room, that sometimes people just needed someone nearby. Someone present. Someone who understood. After a minute of silence, the woman spoke. "My son is sick." Her voice was barely audible. "He has leukemia. He is 8 years old." Charles felt his chest tighten. "What is his name?" "Miguel." She said it with such tenderness, such desperate love, that Charles felt something crack inside him. "I am sorry, Miguel's mom," he said softly. "What did the doctors say?" "They said he needs surgery, a bone marrow transplant. They found a donor, a perfect match. They said if we do the surgery quickly, he has a very good chance, maybe 80%. "That is a good chance," Charles said. "That is really good." The woman nodded, then held up the paper. "But this is what it costs." Charles looked at the paper. The number at the bottom was $85,000. Below it, in smaller print, was a note from the billing department. Insurance coverage, $12,000. Patient responsibility, $73,000. Payment arrangements available upon request. "I do not have this money," the woman said. And now the tears came again, harder, faster. "I work 2 jobs. I have 3 children. My husband left 2 years ago. I have $3,200 in my account. I do not know what to do. The surgery needs to happen within 2 weeks. And I cannot." She could not finish. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to muffle her sobs. Charles took the bill from her hands gently. He studied it carefully, reading every line item. Surgery costs, anesthesia, hospital stay, medications, follow-up care. Everything was there, itemized and precise. "What is your name?" he asked. "Maria. Maria Santos." "Maria, I want you to listen to me carefully. My name is Charles, and I am going to help you." She looked at him, confused through her tears. "You do not have to. I should not have been crying like this. I am sorry. Maria, stop apologizing. Listen to me." She went quiet, looking at him with red, frightened eyes. "Your son needs surgery. The doctors say he has an 80% chance. If the surgery happens quickly, that is the most important thing. Everything else, the money, the bills, all of it, is a problem that can be solved. Do you understand?" Maria nodded slowly. "I want you to stay here. I want you to wait for Miguel. When he comes out of treatment today, I want you to tell him that his surgery is going to happen. Tell him he is going to be okay. Can you do that for me? Yes. But Mr. Charles, I still do not have the money. Let me worry about that. Can you trust me? Maria studied his face. There was something familiar about him, something she could not quite place. But more than that, there was something in his eyes that she recognized, the look of a man who understood what it meant to be terrified for someone he loved. Yes, she said quietly, I trust you. Charles stood up. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Stay here. I will be back. He walked out of the waiting room and down the corridor to the hospital's billing department. It was a small office near the main lobby, staffed by 2 women who handled the financial side of patient care. Charles approached the counter. The woman behind it, a middle-aged brunette named Karen, looked up and did it double take. Mr. Bronson, how can I help you? I need to make a payment on an account, Charles said. He pulled out his checkbook. He always carried it with him, a habit from his early days when cash and checks were the only reliable forms of payment. Of course, which account? Maria Santos. Her son is Miguel Santos. He is an oncology patient. Karen typed the name into the computer. Yes, I have the account here. There is a balance of $73,000 remaining after insurance coverage. I would like to pay the full balance, all of it. Surgery costs, follow-up care, everything. Whatever the total comes to, I want it covered. Karen stared at him. The full balance? Bronson, that is. I know what it is. I would like to pay it. Are you sure? That is a significant. I am sure. Write up the paperwork. I will sign whatever you need me to sign. Karen disappeared into a back office. She returned 5 minutes later with a supervisor, a man named David, who handled large payments. Bronson, David said, trying to keep the surprise out of his voice. Karen tells me you would like to pay the full balance on the Santos account. That is correct. That will come to $85,000, including projected follow-up care costs. Fine. Here, Charles wrote the check. $85,000. He tore it from the checkbook and handed it to David. David looked at the check, then at Charles. Mr. Bronson, I want to make sure you understand. This payment will be completely anonymous. Mrs. Santos will not know who paid. That is exactly what I want. Her name on the receipt should simply read Anonymous Donor, nothing else. If she asks who paid, you tell her it was a charitable contribution from an anonymous source. Under no circumstances does she learn my name. Do we understand each other? Completely, sir. We will process this immediately. One more thing. The surgery needs to happen within 2 weeks. Make sure the billing department does not delay the procedure over payment processing. The check clears tomorrow. The surgery should be scheduled as soon as medically possible after that. Absolutely. I will flag the account personally. Charles nodded and turned to leave. Then he stopped. How long does it usually take to process something like this? For a payment this size, it typically takes 2 to 3 business days to clear and update the account. Can you do it faster? David hesitated. If I escalate it personally, I might be able to get it processed by end of business tomorrow. Do that, please. Charles walked back to the waiting room. Maria was still sitting where he would left her. Though she would stop trying, she was staring at the television, lost in thought. When Charles sat back down, "It is done," he said simply. Maria turned to him, confused. "What is done?" "The bill. It has been taken care of. The full amount. Surgery. Follow-up. Everything. You do not owe the hospital anything." Maria's face went through several stages in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, hope. Then, when the reality of what he had said settled in, absolute shock. What? How? I do not understand. Charitable donation was made to cover your son's medical expenses. It was processed just now. The hospital will contact you tomorrow to confirm and to schedule the surgery. Maria was shaking her head, tears forming again, but different tears this time. That is not possible. Who would? Nobody would just. Someone did, and they want to remain anonymous. So please do not try to find out who it was. Just accept it and focus on Miguel. Maria stared at him. She was searching his face, trying to understand, trying to reconcile the calm, quiet man sitting next to her with the miraculous thing that had just happened. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Do not say anything. Just go. Take care of your son." Charles stood up. He nodded to Maria one last time, then walked back toward Jill's treatment room to check on his wife. Maria Santos sat in that waiting room for another hour, trying to process what had happened. When a nurse finally came out to tell her that Miguel's preliminary blood work was ready, Maria stood up on unsteady legs and followed her back. That night, Maria called the hospital billing department to confirm what Charles had told her. The woman on the phone confirmed it. The full balance had been paid by an anonymous donor. The surgery was being scheduled for the following week. Maria cried again, this time tears of pure relief and gratitude. Miguel Santos had his bone marrow transplant surgery on the February 1009. The surgery went perfectly. The doctors declared him cancer-free 6 months later. Today, Miguel Santos is 43 years old. He has 2 children of his own and works as a pediatric nurse, a career he chose specifically because of what his family went through when he was 8. For 10 years, Maria had no idea who had paid for her son's surgery. The hospital maintained the anonymity perfectly. Every time Maria asked, she was told the same thing. An anonymous donor wished to remain unnamed. It was not until 1999 that she learned the truth. A nurse who would worked at Cedars-Sinai during that period, now retired, mentioned the story at a dinner party. You know that famous case where Charles Bronson paid for a kid's leukemia surgery, $85,000. Completely anonymous, Maria, who happened to be at the same dinner party through a mutual friend, went pale. "What did you say?" The nurse repeated the story. Maria felt the room spin around her. That night, Maria went home and told her children. Miguel, now 18, listened in silence. When his mother finished, he sat quietly for a long time. "So Charles Bronson saved my life," he said finally. "Yes, and he never told anyone. No, he wanted it kept secret." Miguel was quiet again. Then he said something that would shape the rest of his life. "I want to be like that. I want to help people the way he helped me. Not for credit, not for recognition. Just because it is the right thing to do." That conversation led Miguel to pursue nursing. He specialized in pediatric oncology, treating children with cancer, the same disease that had nearly killed him. He chose this path specifically because of what Charles Bronson had done for his family. In 2003, when Charles Bronson died, Miguel saw the obituaries. He read about the tough guy actor, the action star, the man famous for playing vigilantes on screen, but he knew something the obituaries did not mention. He knew that Charles Bronson had saved his life with a single check, written in a hospital billing office on a Tuesday afternoon in February 1019. He contacted the Charles Bronson estate and asked permission to share the story publicly. The estate, after consulting with Charles's family, agreed. Miguel's account of what happened became one of the most widely shared stories about Charles Bronson after his death. It was picked up by news outlets, shared on social media, and became part of the larger narrative about who Charles Bronson really was. Beneath the tough guy image, Maria Santos passed away in 2015. At her funeral, Miguel spoke about his mother's life, her strength, her love, her resilience as a single mother raising 3 children, and he told the story of February 3, 1989. The night a stranger saved her son's life. My mother spent the rest of her life trying to repay that debt, Miguel said. Not financially. She could never have afforded to, but in every other way. She volunteered at hospitals. She donated blood regularly. She helped other families going through medical crises, offering support, companionship, hope. Everything she did after that night was in honor of the man who had given her son back to her. Miguel paused, his voice thick with emotion. I never met Charles Bronson. I was 8 years old when he saved my life, and I did not even know it until I was 18, but I have spent my entire career trying to be worthy of what he did. Every child I treat, every family I support, every night I spend, holding a scared kid's hand in a hospital, that is my way of saying thank you. He looked out at the funeral attendees. Charles Bronson was a tough guy on screen, but in that waiting room on that February night, he was the gentlest man in the world. He saw a mother crying over a bill that was going to cost her son his life, and he fixed it, quietly, anonymously, without any expectation of gratitude or recognition. Miguel's voice broke. That is not acting. That is not a movie. That is just a good man doing the right thing when nobody was watching. The waiting room at Cedars-Sinai where Charles and Maria sat that night still exists. It still has the same uncomfortable chairs, the same beige walls, the same terrible coffee machine. Every day, frightened families sit in those chairs, clutching bills, crying over numbers that seem impossible to pay. And somewhere in that room, perhaps, the ghost of Charles Bronson is still sitting, still watching, still ready to stand up and quietly change someone's life, because that is what he did. Not with guns or fists or dramatic confrontations, but with a check written in a small billing office on an ordinary afternoon, $85,000. No name attached, no strings, no conditions, just a father who understood what it meant to be terrified of losing someone, helping another parent who was feeling the same terror. That is the real Charles Bronson, not the vigilante, not the action hero, just a man with a checkbook and a heart big enough to save a stranger's child. And Miguel Santos, the pediatric nurse who treats children with cancer every single day, is living proof that one anonymous act of kindness can echo through an entire lifetime. February 3, 1099. An 8-year-old boy named Miguel got his life back, and the man who gave it to him never even told anyone. That is not Death Wish. That is not Hollywood. That is just Charles Bronson being exactly who he was when nobody was watching, a hero